play World of Warcraft because I couldn't fall asleep. I went away for like 2 or 3 hours, and these guys are still in the exact same spot. They probably live together. If I get like one good marathon farming session over with, it would just, I would just think that was the greatest. I logged out on this layer, logged back in on the same layer hours later. No pun intended. It's not a pun either. Get me the fuck out of here. Oh, look at that. Day spa. Same, on the other layer. There's like 12 layers or more. Why do I keep teleporting between the same 2 layers? Super shitty at World of Warcraft. Good God, dude. Having trouble? Cannot kill the goddamn thing. Hello. Do you want something from me? It's not polite to stare at someone while they eat, dude. Get the fuck out of here. What are you doing? Just hanging out? Well, that's strange, dude. I swear, is that your mom calling? Can you go somewhere else? You're making me fucking nervous. Honey, come on. Street lights are about to be out. Nope. Fuck. I teleported to a new layer and it's just as shitty as the previous layer. At the fucking very least. I need to do like a 24-hour WoW marathon live stream for restless leg syndrome or work shift disorder or whatever. I'm trying to cure it. That's one of those things. It's like you have to wonder: is something like how is it, when something only becomes a disease when you can suddenly get paid for having it? You're like, doesn't that kind of sway the data? You know what I mean? You're like, restless leg syndrome didn't exist until the government gave you a check for it. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it's one of those diseases like work shift disorder where you're like, wait a second, until the government started writing checks for people having this disease, it didn't exist. So it makes you wonder, is the disease having a restless leg, or is the disease the government paying people to be sick? You know, because there are real sick people out there. You know, I would think that not wanting to work or shaking your leg when you're nervous isn't an excuse not to, more often than not, right? I makes you wonder. Oh, that reminds me. There we go. Much better. Come on now. It's the only guy, man. Hoof shaker. There we go. Give me to a new layer. Maybe. Yeah, you've been farming here like non-stop for like the last 12 hours or so. So you can't be too upset with me for tagging one of these mobs. Jerry. I'm so glad I got my 3-piece, man. That was a triumph. That was a fucking triumph. Yeah, we have yet to see the Pizza Gators sink their fucking snaggled teeth into this here email leak. Like, you would think they'd be all over it, making mountains out of basically nothing at all. It's gonna happen eventually. Come on now. One more 2-piece set bonus, man. So Sunday, I have to find a Karazhan group this week, which is shitty because I didn't do it the other day. I really should have, but let's see if my guild has one. The thing is like they only have, I guess, enough for like 25 raiders or so. So that's like 2 Karazhan groups, and yeah. So I've been pugging it with this other group of guys that are all actually like surprisingly good at the video game here. Almost suspiciously good at WoW, right? You guys don't have any other characters? You promise? Right. Between the other 9 other of you people, not one of you can afford a microphone for your computer? Really? What is it here? What is it now? You can fucking whatever. That's the thing though, is like, why is the implant required for detecting human brain spikes, right? Can't you just put on a helmet? Are they getting to that point? 'Cause I'm trying to think of a way like a telepathy helmet. You know what I mean? If they have the guy that can move the mouse cursor and stuff, then text to speech and all that. You know, so like quite literally a fucking, you know, telepathy helmet. Thing is, there's this thing called a Muse headband, and it's one of those things that measures your beta, theta, and all that, like your brainwave states and all that. You would think, I think the problem there is that that type of device isn't sensitive enough to pick up on the thing. Like galvanic skin response is only so accurate, you know, because the variation in the salinity and all that stuff, or whatever it's called, right, means that it reads better or worse, so it's not consistent. You know what I mean? I think that might be what it is. It's not as consistent as like an actual implant, but you would think they're getting to the point now. I mean, a couple of years, they probably have it already, where you can wear the fucking thing in your head and connect it to a speaker, and just talk with your mind, right? Surely they're working on it. When they do that, that'll be pretty cool. Wish I knew more about how the human brain worked, though. But the thing is, could you make an accurate enough helmet without having to implant somebody? I know like the shit you can buy off Amazon and stuff, like off the shelf EKG or whatever they're called, or encephalograms or whatever to read your brain waves, are not as accurate as like the actual thing I was just talking about. But is that an issue of science and physics, or is that an issue of it's expensive to make the hardware? Because you would think if you can make the hardware expensive but not have to do an implant, then like any technology, as time and improvement, you know, continues forward or whatever, then it becomes cheaper and smaller. And you know, how cool would it be to be able to type and not have to say anything or touch your keyboard or nothing? It would be awesome. Talking about completely getting rid of a keyboard and mouse eventually. You have eye tracking, a brain helmet that can, you know, if it can even just determine the difference between yes and no, you know what I mean, then you can make a user interface designed around yes and no commands, right? If you can couple that with blink stuff, you know what I mean, um, gaze detection, plus that, and you get what I'm saying? But I think the thing is nuance, right? So with today's technology, you would just assume that as it gets more expensive, then it gets more accurate, or the available vocabulary increases, you know, or pre-programmed, you know, vocabulary that it can detect. You think with even probably some of the shittier equipment that you could probably buy offline and make the custom software for it, there's a likelihood that you could at least do yes and no. You know what I mean? There's a pretty stark difference between the two. You know, as far as what part of your brain lights up, more than likely. But then, like anything, like in technology, is if it starts off small, it ends up big eventually if you keep working on it. So, just a proof of concept would be great, right? I wonder, man, because it's like, what is it, all machine learning, right? I would think, you know, it might not be a pattern you can see with the naked eye or whatever, but you do enough sessions of yes and no's training an AI. What do your brainwaves look like when you're in a no state? What does your brainwaves look like when you're in a yes state, right? You might be able to do this shit with just like some fucking salt water and some shit you buy off the Amazon store or whatever, and the right software. It all looks like gibberish to us, but it might not be. You never know. Like if I could get a helmet to wear and where if all it did was counterspell when I thought the word no, I would say that's the coolest fucking thing ever. You know what I mean? The shit exists. They have it, dude. I already know. They have it somewhere. They just don't sell it at the store. I guarantee it. But if all it did was counterspell when I said the word no in my mind, I would say, well, that's fucking awesome. You'd basically just sit there, you know, and play a game or whatever, browse your computer with the thing, and it would tell you to say a word, think of a word, and tell it what it is, and it would monitor your brain waves, and it would just trial and error, and eventually it would learn that brainwave pattern. You know, you just have to have an accurate enough piece of machinery to do it. But the science behind how it works isn't that complicated. Machine learning, that piece of equipment plus enough data to train the thing to understand the difference. That might be my next thing I try to do is just a test run of how to see if I can't train an AI model to do something simple. Like I've seen people teach them to detect cursive and all that. Handwriting, they say, you know, people always give examples of that. Gaze detection. Is that like gaydar? Shut the fuck up, dude. It's not what I'm talking about. Like gaydar, dude? Yeah, like gaydar, retard. No, not like gaydar. Okay, it's a little like gaydar, right? No, gaze detection, like where you're looking. Gaydar. Although, They did refer to a metal detector as Jew radar once before. I fucking made myself laugh. Look at this Jew radar. Fucking metal detector. Fucking Jew radar. Oh man. Picking up on a golden blath. Or what are they? Goldberg, Goldstein. Looks like I found a Goldstein. Fucking metal detector. Anyway, I'm not going to hell. I already know. I've pardoned myself, right? I am not going to hell. Is it Saturday? For fuck's sakes, it's Saturday already. That means tomorrow. I gotta raid tomorrow. I gotta be on my A game, eh? The Canadian hockey team's always on their A game. Huh. But it's... Hear about that hockey team, they're always on their A game. Just get me to a layer where there's fucking less people, dude. This shit is treacherous. See, with that 2-piece set bonus, I have my shield up, but if I don't have it up and I keep casting, it won't interrupt me. That's one of those things, like, now, it might get into some of the more, like, public knowledge, but it's not talked about a whole lot. But I've always wondered, like, transmitting a signal to a brain versus picking up a signal, two totally different things, right? Inverse square, like, but the thing is that signal coherence beyond, like, skin contact is, from what I understand, not very possible. So when these people get online and they say, not with the same piece of machinery or same piece of equipment, there's got to be a way to do it. That's like something I've tried to challenge myself to figure out. Would be like, how the fuck, how on earth do you pick up a signal from somebody's brain remotely? You know what I mean? There's got to be a way to do it. Got to figure it out eventually. Wonder if they have it somewhere. Come on now. This is a hoof shaker. Oh, he's not doing it on purpose. Minimuffness. Get me off this layer, please. his lair? That work? I just get on an awesome layer with an awesome spot and everything. But fuck.
It's not ready yet. It's too far away.
Like, fucking all these people just showed up out of the middle of nowhere. Just a second ago, I was like the only person here. What the fuck are these people doing?
I don't have a target. I need a target. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet. I can't cast that yet. That's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. That's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. I can't cast that yet. That's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet. I can't cast that yet. That's still recharging.
Fucking got enough
That
shit
spell
here.
isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet.
Anyway. God damn it.
That's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet.
Plus having that 2-piece set bonus for PvP,
Cast that yet.
not getting your spells interrupted when you get hits, pretty helpful. I don't know if I'd wear it over regular arena gear at some point in time, but
Get closer.
if I could just get it to recognize yes and no, that'd be super cool. I don't want to sit here and watch you die, guy, but you are kind of here, and I do want to farm.
That's still recharging. It's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet. My mana is low.
Oh, great.
That's still recharging.
There's not a lot of Asian driver jokes about Tiger Woods. Now that I think about it, I don't think I've heard any. He was like the most opportune time to do it. Now, do I really want to put up with this guy farming here? Come on, man. Fucking. All right. Well, we're gonna play it cool for a little while because I clearly outnumber you. I don't have to, but it doesn't always work out that way. But I can guarantee you this would be a situation. If it were the other way around, I'd be getting fucking ganked all day. They keep saying blew a 0-0 or whatever and blah 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 and still got a DUI. It's like, yeah, that's why it's a DUI, not DWI, right? Not that I'm like an expert on the matter, but isn't one under the influence of anything and the other is just alcohol specific? It's like you can blow a 0 and get a DUI all day because LSD and ketamine and all the other stuff people do, right? I'm so glad I got my fucking Spellfire set. Now I just need a helmet, which I can do Spell Strike Hood if I farm enough gold. And I've been kind of on a tirade this morning though, because I'm trying to think like transaction, Solana versus Ethereum. You'd have to think like all the heavy lifting is being done on traditional infrastructure and stuff, right? Like hardly any of the compute other than the transactional shit goes into being on chain. So you're like, well, and this isn't a mystery, you know, but people say, well, that's just a JPEG stored on a server and you have, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, but that's how all of this shit works, right? There's like, with latency, decentralized computing is super inefficient and shitty, right? Like for blockchain and stuff, it serves a great purpose, but the idea that you're going to solve like a whole bunch of the world's problems by, I mean, like maybe eventually, but it's not there yet, you know. Storage, yeah, no, storage is a great system resource to decentralize, but latency between nodes computing is like fucking makes the most inefficient computer on planet Earth, you know. It's like putting a mile between each transistor, you know what I mean? You're like, there's a reason why they make chips smaller and not bigger, essentially, right? If you can get rid of latency through quantum internet at some point in time, yeah, decentralized computing is all the way, right? But when you're thinking of like purely on a transaction basis, right? So the transaction being the initiating factor or force in an AI automation script. You're like, but so what it boils down to is whichever chain can handle the most transactions per second and have you know 100% uptime or as close to it as possible is going to be the chain that wins that fight for sure. And the fact of the matter is, look, I've always been a bigger fan of Solana anyway, but the idea that, well, they'll come up with a layer 2 solution. It's like, yeah, but even with their layer 2 solution, the amount of traffic that's going to be handled on Solana is absurd, period. And they aren't even done with like all the fucking shit I don't even know about, the Alpenglow and the Mithrils and all the shit that I'm not aware of, right? Like efforts to reduce resources latency. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of shit in the works. 00 looks like it's doing something amazing in the realm of like reducing latency between nodes and all that. So the fact of the matter is, the Claudebot thing, liken it to the Claudebot's heartbeat. You're like, just the heartbeat interactions alone would be enough to completely crash the Ethereum chain with a relatively low user base, right? So how does Ethereum possibly stay alive through all this? I don't fucking know, dude. I have no clue. Just the most basic fundamental kind of ping requests and stuff would you mean, what is it, however many transactions a second Ethereum has, right, would be enough to where it wouldn't work, period. So you gotta go with Solana. And that's like, well, and Solana has yet to explore a layer 2 solution for that problem too, you know, if it ever gets down to it. You'd think it would have to at some point in time. There'd have to be some, you know, just because the amount of, it's a relatively low amount of compute that it uses, but the transaction process, right? We're talking about at some point in time, possibly every one individual having at least one AI agent that is represented somewhere in cyberspace, if not on-chain specifically. And if it isn't on-chain directly, then it has a component that at some point in time interfaces with, has an endpoint that ends at Solana or begins at Ethereum or so on and so forth, right? So potentially 8 billion of these robots living online, you're like, well, and them constantly pinging each other and requesting shit, you're like, yeah, you're gonna need, you know, at some point in time, even 15, 75, and 100,000 transactions per second seems like it's not gonna be enough, you know. But luckily it's all in its infancy, so you know, like you could just use a credit card, but yeah, but the point is that you cannot audit the trail of a credit card, period, you know, and that's valuable information to some people. Stable coins and X402 and all that shit I was reading about earlier, I'm sitting there thinking like, well, if all that stuff is basically not a derivative, if maybe it is, maybe that's what it's called, of a US Treasury bond or whatever, represented as like a real world asset represented on chain as a dollar or whatever, that certainly makes the case for using a blockchain for that solution versus just saying like an automatic clearinghouse thing that Visa has or whatever. Because even then, some of these crypto networks, blockchains can support more transactions per second than the Visa network can, can't they? Do I have that right? So how would even a network like a Visa network or whatever, how would that keep up in this day and age if sometimes 10 and 20 transactions are required to fulfill one request? Don't shoot at me, Mr. Redman. I'm staying out of your two's fucking domestic dispute and everything. So the point being is that the one thing that crypto does really well is transactions. Maybe not compute, but how many TX per second on Visa? There's probably a whole bunch more. I'm probably stupid. 65,000 transactions per second. Okay, so that's about even with Solana, right? And that's without any sort of layer 2 implementation, right? So I mean, it makes the case that yeah, no, like, whereas there's a lot of things with cryptocurrency or blockchain technology, you go, well, why? You know, why put it on chain? There's no reason to, you know. But this certainly makes the case that no, like the technology that's designed to handle this sort of throughput is cryptocurrency only, right? Like traditional frameworks and infrastructures and technology, you know, implementing a change to the Visa network, I'm sure, is far more complicated than a proposal to improve the Solana blockchain, more than likely. all the red tape and fucking personalities and shit that get in the way at a company, you wonder why some of this shit slips through these companies' fingers so often, right? Because there's so much red tape. Like the board of directors has to fucking be appeased at all costs and everything else, you know. Yeah, so without any upgrade currently to, I guess, the Solana network, it's evenly matched with the Visa network, so even the Visa network would not be able to handle the amount of transaction data required to facilitate AI to agent fucking transactions, period. You need, at some point in time, you'll need a layer 2 or an improvement on Solana, you know what I mean? And you would think, you tell an agent to do one thing, it has to interact with 5 other things and generate a payment and send it to them, and they have to do it cheaply and efficiently. And you say one of these exists for every one person on planet Earth at some point in time. You know what I mean? It stands to reason. Eventually you're gonna have to improve the network. I know for a fact 14 transactions a second doesn't work. You know what I mean? But with interoperability, agent to agent interaction across multiple chains, it's going to be a constant one-way flow of assets from Ethereum to Solana. Well, why? Because it's the only place it can go, right? It can't even exist in its own network, you know what I mean? It'll overflow and go somewhere else at some point in time. And the only other place currently for it to go is Solana. And the assets and the exchanges from Solana can but don't necessarily flow through to Ethereum because the network currently in its current state cannot handle that throughput, basically, right? So like even if any of it does is replace the pre-existing Visa net infrastructure, it's totally worth its weight in gold then, right? Oh, dude, why haven't we launched fucking Spider Cash cryptocurrency, right? It's called Spider Cash. That's funny. I was just about to post the other day too, and I didn't. I was like, you know, in some alternate dimension, Bitcoin is named eCash, right? Some fucking Twilight Zone universe, right? Some alternate dimension, you know, fucking. Come on, guy. Shooting at me. I've been sitting here farming with you all goddamn day. Oh, he just accidentally tabbed and did it. Yeah, I'm not trying to PvP here, dude. I'm trying to fucking farm and get my goddamn gear. So, yeah, and I've looked up some of the companies and what their strategies as far as what it constitutes for them to issue a stable coin. And like, I wish there was a more, like, I know Tether said they're auditing theirs, an external audit or whatever. But I know at Coinbase or wherever Circle, wherever they do the US dollar coin, it's like mostly short-term treasury bonds and stuff, like things that are almost instantly redeemable for cash if necessary. So I always, which would is a good idea, I would think. Anything that like basically low yield, high, whatever the fuck it is, right? Like short-term treasury bonds or whatever, the redeemable. I forget what the months is or whatever, but the amount of months are. But I don't know what's the standard set for. I mean, is it universal or does Tether have a different? You know, how do they come to the conclusion that, well, we have enough now to issue a US dollar tether on Ethereum or whatever. I know Coinbase, like I said, they use short-term treasury bonds and some other stuff, cash on hand. assets that you would consider to be liquid, I guess, right? I don't know what the other people's standards are. I really don't. I like Tether, but haven't taken the time to read up on it. But you know there are some willy-nilly motherfuckers out there that are just like, well, because we said so, that's why, and my word's worth $1 to you for some reason, right? But yeah, I would not ever suggest making a stable coin that doesn't have some sort of asset to back it. And I would say you'd have to be very careful about which assets you use, you know, for actually cash on hand. Things that if they go kaput, we're all fucked regardless. The U.S. Treasury bonds or whatever. So when they say dollar value assessed in real world assets or real world assets assessed in dollars, I don't know if do they include like treasury bonds and stuff and cash? I would think so, right? But you would think, I don't know, I think so. I think they do, Jerry. I think that they do, Jerry. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that, yeah, so them tokenizing real world assets like treasury bonds on Solana or Ethereum in the form of US dollar coins is a really good idea, period. Well, why? Because all the shit that I just said. Even the traditional Visa network cannot handle the amount of transactions required to facilitate all of this fucking computers talking to each other. So I hate when I see someone like Circle, like them saying the Stablecoin Act or whatever. Yeah, you don't understand though. Like a stablecoin is going to be like the de facto fuel, you know, for AI interactions in the future. There's going to be other protocols and the cryptocurrencies associated with it and all that. But for all intents and purposes, you need to do whatever you can do to get as many of those on chain as possible, right? Because you don't want there to be a point in time where a lack of supply and something that has a finite value increases its value, you know what I mean? I don't know how the pegging works, but if there gets to be a point where there's so many transactions and only so many dollars, and suddenly a dollar is worth $2 when it's not, and that's not a safe thing to do, you know. So, could you come up with a way to automatically purchase treasuries if that were to happen? Or if the demand for stable coins rose to a certain amount, could you set up an AI to automatically purchase treasuries? Or is that like, do treasury auctions works like they only do them like once a week or whatever? But all in all, though, all this automation is just a clever way for us to trick the banks into giving us our money back, you know. All the money they printed with, like, you know, borrowed against your hard work and labor and all that shit. Like, this is just a clever scheme to get it all back, you know, get it all returned to us. I just don't want the standard requirement for, like, you know, the quality requirement for them to issue a dollar on chain to be lower than what the two things that I mentioned. Because if you start getting into like, well, we'll issue a stable coin and we'll value it at less, but we'll back it with not treasuries, but mortgages or security. You know, you're like, come on now, this is exactly what happened in 2008, right? You're like, the reason why is like, yeah, those are more risky assets. So you want there to be stability, right? You know, stable coins for a reason, Jerry. on, dude, really? It's like a minute-long fear. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be pretty much 100% liquid before I would say that's a good idea. But the thing I was talking about earlier, right? So I forget what the number of it was or whatever, but so one of the issues currently with AI is that you have to use like so many different people's plugins and APIs and shit to get the thing to work, and each one of those costs a certain amount of dollars. But apparently with this like X402 stuff, right? So like automation payments and interaction between agents and everything else, right? Um, you'll be able to not if not just by yourself, right? Like if it's headed that way, it'd be great. But currently with projects that I'm familiar with, the idea that for APIs you have to like pre-purchase API tokens, right? And you're like, well, you purchase 100,000 tokens, and what if you only use like 600,000 or 700,000 of them? Well, then you purchase more than you need, but you can't not have them. You know what I mean? So potentially, a smart contract that deploys that's wrapped that consists of if this is how it works, if not, then whatever. A stablecoin payment through X402 wrapped with whatever the native cryptocurrency is to facilitate the automation. That way, like, it's transparent. You can see, like, it shows you right then and there what the API plugins costs are, and you can, I guess, mark it up a little bit if you want to, or leave it right where it is, and say, like, so you know the reason why this prompt cost 15 cents is because 3 cents have to go to here, 5 cents has to go there, so on and so forth. Real transparent. You can see it right there on the spreadsheet and everything or whatever. But and then however many tokens are required, and those go to the automation platform, right? That goes to the developer. Um, so that way you're like, well, you're charging so much to like, well, you have to understand the reason why some of these things are so costly is because you have to outsource the compute to like 5 or 6 different companies and utilize their framework, and all that shit costs electricity, and it requires them to have servers and this, that, and the other thing, right? But if you were to have a smart contract interaction where the payer agrees that, well, the reason why it costs this much dollars plus a token or two or whatever is because it's utilizing these frameworks, and plain as day, that's what they cost. You can go to the website, see it yourself. It's transparent. You can audit it yourself. Then that way, one of the things that's hard for these guys, what did the guy say the other day? If you're not spending $250,000 a year in tokens, then you're doing it wrong. If you're like a chief developer or whatever. The thing is like for people that don't have a whole lot, they would love to develop things that utilize expensive tokens, right? But they themselves do not have the cash flow to do this like initiation phase. You know what I mean? To get 100,000 tokens to test the thing enough to get it to working correctly. So this in and of itself is kind of a way of alleviating that kind of stress or pressure on a developer as far as like the initial token costs to try and run or test something, right? That way you can say like, look, this token here is what compensates me for my work. You can see that the dollars though are going directly to the API providers because you got to use electricity to make the fucking thing run, you know, essentially. I know that's all things that can be coded onto a smart contract, I'm pretty sure. At some point in time. And the thing is like, yeah, well, but now I know for sure, well, you could just do it on Visa. Like, yeah, no, you couldn't. Couldn't do it on Visa. Couldn't do it with traditional payment infrastructure. So stable coins are more important than ever, you know. I don't know what all this shit in the news is about. I really don't. Like, lobbied for or against, I don't fucking know. wheelhouse. I'm just saying that if we can get more assets on chain in the form of dollar tokens that are backed by liquid, highly liquid and safe assets, then that's a good thing. For all the reasons I just mentioned. Plus permission payments, right? Like you not having to sit there and approve every transaction, you know, basically with an AI agent, you give it a bankroll and you tell it like, okay, for this I say that you're allowed to use $1. And it'll say, well, I believe I can do it for like 75 cents, but it might cost up to 80. And you're like, okay, well, you're approved to use that much and no more. Whereas in a credit card transaction, there's no smart application to it. You would have to individually sit there and approve and approve and approve. And you're talking about having to approve 5 and 10 and 20 transactions to get one prompt done correctly. You're like, yeah, the fucking shit, come on now, dude, that's super gay. So that's the reason why all this shit has to be done on chain. And then even if you could do it, the fucking Visa network would crash, you know what I mean? I mean, I know it's like, that's like a fucking, you get what I'm saying, but you're like, adding any more to the traditional infrastructure, where you're like, well, we have a decentralized solution that already has, I don't know how many billions of dollars in tokenized US dollar coin, Tether, and stable coins and all that shit. Like, trust me, the decentralized works much better. It only gets better. Plus, I was saying, like, when you create something new on chain like that, and you have all of the communicative and transaction data, like, mind you, those two are the exact same thing, on chain, you know what I mean, or stored somewhere, you can actually audit like the origin of an invention and say like it's a cool idea. You know, you'd rather have it than not have it. You know, you're like, I wonder what made this piece of fucking machinery here, right? And you can go, well, you can look at the fucking hive of transactions around it. You can sit there and see it was this guy's agent talking to this guy, getting this information and relaying it to Agent C, which then told Agent D, you know, and down the chain there. And you say, well, like, basically, if you get to the point where AI is actually generating patents and creating things through this process, you're like, how do you compensate, you know, the virtual workers that made it all happen? And you would say, well, all the fucking people that are in the auditable chain of information and exchanges, you know, you would say is that would be the people or the things or whatever, the AI agents that are entitled to like the royalties or whatever the profits from the creation or whatever the invention is or whatever. And then all that information has been fairly assessed and weighted and valued, which is a complicated process, you know, and done without bias nonetheless, right? Like, oh, well, I think this information's worth more than that, or I think it's worth less. It's like, no, we've got a way of determining what it's actually fucking worth, you know. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Which is a time-consuming and difficult process for the reasons I just mentioned. Giving all data value, all information value possibly. Instead of a guy having to look through it and go, I think it's worth about, I think it's worth about. Right, like no actual unbiased assessment of what information is worth, right? That's valuable in and of itself. All stored on chain for you to view whenever you want. Prove it to yourself, whatever. Is this the same guy? Cool. Help me clearing out these guys, guy. Such a fucking Vichy French thing of me to do, but okay, I'm not trying to hear it. I'm not trying to hear it, dude. I'm not trying to PvP with these people. I'm trying to farm primal fires. feel like I'm the only one staying out of all this shit going on here. These two hunters have managed to pick a fight with all these people. Just leave me alone.
That's still recharging. I need a target. I don't
This
have a
guy's gonna
target.
get brave though, because he's got a friend with him now. It always works that way. I try not to fuck with these people, and then I get outnumbered and I end up getting fucked, basically.
I need a target. I don't have a target. I need a target. I don't have a target. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. That's still recharging. It's too far away. That spell isn't ready yet. It's still recharging. Get closer.
The thing is, too, though, is like not every interaction requires a transaction, but the sheer quantity of these things running around in the fucking wild at some point in time is going to be enough that you've got to have a network that can handle it, basically.
I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet.
So can I mouse over
That spell isn't
counterspell?
ready yet.
That might be better than trying to.
I can't cast that
Might
yet.
have to get mouse
That's
over
still
for either one. Then
recharging.
I won't have to have a focus macro for any of that shit. Mouse over counterspell. You have to make sure that you're like you get used to playing where you are mindful of where your cursor is. You know. Other than that,
It's too far away. I can't cast that yet.
the reason I'm all gung ho about this shit today is because there's very few instances where
That spell isn't
there's a
ready yet.
reason outside of just because it's crypto that there's a reason to make something decentralized. You know what I mean?
That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet.
Doing it just for the sake of doing it because it's fun is cool, but you want an answer that's more like, well, because it does this better than that, right? You want a real reason.
That's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet.
You'd hopefully get it to the point where at some point in time in the future, each time you upload or each new node to Solana that you plug in or turn on means it can handle this many more transactions, you know. And I'm
That's
sure
still recharging.
at some point in the future it's headed that direction where like just the more nodes you add to the network,
That
the
spell
faster the
isn't
shit
ready
works,
yet.
you know. For now, it's kind of the way it is, and it's doing a better job than any of the other chains, you know. But
That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. I can't cast that yet.
So like what I'm seeing now is a lot of projects rather unapologetically turning things into crypto. I say crypto, but you know what I mean. For the sake of basically getting paid and no real reason to be, you know what I mean? No real rhyme or reason as to why it should be an on-chain thing, right? And like the more I'm seeing just kind of like, well, if you're ignorant of the overall space, this looks new to you. But if you're not to say I'm well versed, but if I guess you're aware of both sides of the coin here, then you're like, well, this is something I've seen this before. Um, and I can say that um, that there that I don't feel that way about Leah. You know what I mean? There are things that provide something similar, but not so similar that you wouldn't say, you know what I mean, that Leah isn't like the most unique thing that I've ever seen. And I admit that I could do more research, I could dig deep and probably find other things too, but the fact of the matter is, cryptocurrency is my wheelhouse for sure, so it's things that I'm most familiar with. But when I get to moving around and seeing other things, I'm like, well, these guys are making something that's very awfully similar to something I've seen elsewhere. And when I seen it elsewhere, I wasn't impressed. You know what I mean? So, and I realize there's only so much frameworks and foundation models and things at hand for you to be able to use. But I would like to say that the thing that's actually doing something different, not just a way of like cleverly vibe coding a representation of showing you what something that like in a 3D or higher dimensional kind of plane of expression or whatever, versus it just being like basically the infographic equivalent of what it's actually doing, if that makes any sense. Like these cool visualizations, I guess, explaining things that otherwise didn't have visualization before. You're like, okay, so why does that need to be a crypto project
That spell isn't ready yet.
if it's doing what has already been done before? And it's not utilizing any of the things that I just mentioned, so maybe it will in the future. I don't know. But for now, it seems like there's no real reason. It's like, well, it's because we spent 3 years developing it in the private sector, or whatever you want to call it, and no one wanted to buy our thing then. And we worked for 3 years. We want to get paid. Crypto's the way to get paid, right? Versus, well, we started off in crypto grassroots because fucking getting a few $1,000s for all the API shit's impossible to do on planet Earth for whatever reason, and and so along the way we've made it very crypto centric, so that way it doesn't feel out of place in the crypto community.
I can't cast that. That spell isn't ready yet.
And go figure, all this stuff will be pretty trivial by the end of it. Implementing and integrating all this shit, I'm sure, I won't be the one to be able to do it, but um, the idea that, well, because, making the thing all based on crypto transactions and everything else, the things that I mentioned earlier about automated payments and interactions and all that stuff, you're like, well, you'll be probably pretty glad that you developed the thing in crypto versus using traditional framework, because it's already like pre-integrated into the network and payment infrastructure that way. It already exists natively where that actually takes place, right? Versus like, well, we'll add all that later.
I can't cast that. That's still uncharted. That spell isn't ready yet.
What the fuck? I just unplugged my headphones. Where the fuck did my sound just go? Serious? Well, hold on a second. Hello, hello. Why am I fucking... Let me relog real quick. unplugged my headphones on accident. There we go.
That's still recharging.
Not having much luck on these primal fire drops.
Past that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. I can't attack that target. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I need a target. I don't have a target. I need a target. I don't have a target. I need a target. I don't have a target. I need a target. I don't have a target.
God damn it.
I need a target. I don't have a target. I need a target. I don't have a target. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. I can't cast that yet. That's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging.
But the thing is for Leah, now, Def has to use the HeyGen. That's the reason why I'm thinking of all these things, is because he's got to use the HeyGen API to make the chat with Leah feature work. But he's also come up with, I'm pretty sure, man, like, if I remember correctly, when he came up with the Pump Fun stream, he had to use a whole totally different thing, right? He had to create like a new thing for it. And like, yeah, it requires a whole lot of system resources, but
That's
it's a
still
proof of
recharging.
concept that the same idea works even without. It's God, don't quote me on it because I don't know for sure, but
I
not
can't
having to
cast
utilize
that
the
yet.
HeyGen API, because API costs are so ridiculous, you know. And I would think there's probably even more ways to reduce the amount of resources required to do it
That's
correctly.
still recharging.
I've looked at some of the metahuman things,
I can't cast that
and
yet. That spell isn't ready
I
yet.
think developing on that platform would probably be the best idea, as far as being open-ended and deployable on using the Unreal Engine and all that shit. You're like, because you essentially at some point in time just want to be able to drag and drop your character into a video game if you want to. Like your Half-Life character or your Fortnite character is your AI, you know. And it would be best to utilize the framework that is developed already to do that kind
That's
of thing
still
with the
recharging.
minimal system resources. And they have some very good quality shit. They've got some stuff that looks like you can barely tell it apart from real life on a metahuman.
It's too far away. That's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet. I can't cast that yet.
But I'd love to see where, at some point in time in the future, if we could get to where we get all that updated, get all the framework, and get it all working, like if we could pump out like one new AI a week, dude, that'd be awesome.
That spell isn't ready yet.
Like real deal, kind of like new face,
I can't cast that yet.
all the kind of stuff you want.
That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet.
Come on now.
That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. That spell isn't ready yet.
Really, that killed my fire elemental already? Fucking serious, guy?
That's still recharging. I can't cast that yet. It's still recharging. That spell isn't ready yet.
Let me get, okay, yeah, I'm gonna log now. Yep, yep, yep. If I fucking, might be on later. But if not, I'll talk to you guys later.